Hi, and welcome to the webinar. That was just a short pause to allow other delegates to arrive. Thank you for attending today. I know everybody's time is very valuable, so hopefully we can give you some good information today. As the name implies, talking technical illustration, we want to try and interact with you, so I'll give you a quick rundown on how you can do that in a second. So the rules are pretty much the same as usual with any webinar, apart from we will unmute a delegate if they want to ask a question, and you can do that by raising your hand. My colleague and boss, Don Larson, is online as well, but he's going to stay in the background in case of questions that I can't answer. But he's monitoring that, so please raise your hand if you have a question during the webinar itself. You can also ask questions through the questions panel, of course. Post those at any time, and we'll kind of make a decision on the fly if we answer those straight away or we wait till the end. Plus, if you ask a question, and we'll kind of judge that question. We're taking part in an event next week called TDW Live. So you can get a ticket to that event. It's a virtual event. You don't have to attend in person. You can go back and see on-demand presentations. So, but that's taking place next week. It's on the UK time. So please ask a question, and we'll make a judgment on it, and then you can get a free ticket. But also encourage you to take part in the event as well if you don't win the ticket. So for those not aware, Larson Software Technology, we're based in Houston, Texas. We recently moved into a new facility, although it's limited capacity, as we all know at the moment, with a lot of people working from home. We develop software products mainly in the graphics market. We develop off-the-shelf and SDKs, so software development kits. So if companies want to integrate our software into their own applications, they can do. We have quite a few companies who do that. We also have a store where we kind of add in products as we go along. One of the main ones was we used to do a free viewer called VisX Reader. We now charge for that product so we can maintain it properly and look after it and look after customers. So that's available in the store. And we've just added VisX Pro, which is our other viewer, and in the future we'll probably add other products as well as we move forward. One of the products we'll talk about, or technologies we'll talk about today, is VisX View HTML5, which allows you to view CGM on the web without a plugin. So we'll also be talking briefly about that today. If you do know the company, we've been involved with CGM for a very long time. The company is 30 years old, so and we're working with CGM all that time. And you'll also hear during this particular webinar that we've been doing a lot of work with SVG as well. So I think you'll find that interesting. So our target kind of audience is technical publications, engineers, geologists, geophysicists, and that's where the company came from, really, is oil and gas, where CGM was used as well. So I'll give you a bit of an intro in a second to the event, but the agenda, we'll be looking at the file formats themselves historically and what's the commonality between the two and their usage. And then we'll talk a bit about conversion and display and some of the issues and considerations you need to make and consider when you are actually converting from one format to another. Then we'll talk about something very specific, might not be for everybody on the call, but if you're working with S1000D, the technical publication specification, then a bit of information around that, and more specifically CGM, and then we'll do a bit of a summary and and then at the end we'll do some questions, but we can take those as we go along. So if you join late, then there's an option to raise your hand. So if you want us to open your mic and you want to ask a question, we will do that. Otherwise, just post your questions into the questions panel, and we'll either answer those as we go along, or we'll answer those at the end. So historically, CGM has been around, or seems like it's been around for a long time. It's very stable, very robust. It's an open format, which was one of the reasons we chose it. And being open, it just really means that anybody can use it, develop on it, and it's not proprietary to any company. So in theory, you should always use it as your archive, so you can move it around with other pieces of software. SVG is a bit different. It was really developed specifically to deliver vector graphics on the web. So as opposed to CGM, it's not we wouldn't really recommend it as an interchange format. It's more of a format you would use for display of graphics, but not particularly then bringing them back in to edit them. Although we've done a lot of work, and you'll hear that today, around trying to standardize SVG so you can import, export, so kind of round trip it. But if you want to learn more about the format, there's a link there. You'll get the slides and you'll be able to link back to that. But it was something that was developed specifically for the internet, for the web, to deliver vector graphics. So that's SVG, Scalable Vector Graphic. So the commonality, what's the commonality between the two? Well, they're both 2D formats, and they both are accredited by the W3C, so they're not proprietary. So that applies to both of them, which is a good thing. And we think they're really good for technical illustrations because of their vector in nature, and the fact that they can be hybrid as well. So if you've got legacy information that's from a scan, then you can contain both the legacy as a raster and then add vectors to it. So you have a hybrid format, and both formats are capable of doing that. They both have the potential to be validated. In other words, if you work into a particular specification, if the company's got the right tools, they can validate it against a set of rules. So CGM can be done with very specific tools, but SVG, we'll talk about that in more detail later, is based on XML. So that has the potential to be validated as well against the schema. The other key thing is they both can contain metadata. So they can contain, say, hotspot information for interactive graphics. And in the case of SVG, you can have the capability of animation as well. One of the keys for SVG was, though, that it didn't need a plugin to display the file on the web. So it's actually native to HTML5, which is a big plus. So there's no plugin required. CGM, this was one of its kind of downside, is that it needed a controller, ActiveX control, to actually view the graphics in a web environment. That's something we recognized because a lot of the web browsers were abandoning ActiveX controls. So we came up with our own technology to view CGMs in a web environment without a plugin. So that is now possible using PhysX View HTML5 as well. So you can mix and match between the two. You can choose the one that suits your project best. But that's what we did, just to kind of circumvent the disappearance of ActiveX. So as I mentioned, CGM is a 2D graphics format. It's managed by the CGM Open organization, and it's been around since the 1980s. I don't think that's a reason to abandon it as a format, or not think it's modern and useful. It's that it does the job, and that's the most important thing. It's reliable, and it can contain raster, vector, and also interactive graphics. So in that respect, it's still up there. So where is it used? I think most of the people on the call today will recognize that it's used within aerospace and defense. It's also used in automotive and oil and gas still. So the reason it's used in these industries, certainly the top one, is because of it's part of specifications such as ATA for the commercial aerospace and S1000D for commercial aerospace and defense. So that's one of the main reasons it's used there. Oil and gas, it also had a profile associated with it for interchange of files, and that was one of the reasons it was used there, although less nowadays. And also in automotive, it's used widely within the automotive industry, and it's the same profile as actually as S1 used in S1000E called Web CGM. So a lot of manufacturing companies using it, but usually within these specific industries. The beauty of CGM is that it can be used as an interchange format as well as a display format. And that's a bit where kind of SVG kind of falls down. So we'd always say keep your archive in CGM. Is probably the most reliable format for data interchange. So SVG, one of the big interests here is it's XML encoded. And I really like that about it in the respect of it kind of fits in well with the specifications that we work with, certainly within S1000E and ATA for the delivering of the text side. So we have like data modules that are XML based. So it kind of makes sense that the graphical formats move in that direction as well. But today, SVG really has not been adopted within those communities, which is in some ways surprising. If you do a search on the S1000D specification, for instance, and this is the latest one, you find, I think it's one instance of the SVG in there, and it doesn't give you any guidance, or it just mentions it as a format. So, and I don't know why that is, but it could be that it's cost to introduce it into the specification. But perhaps things will change in the future. We've also found this within the 3D world as well, that there is nothing really specified within 3D file formats either. So one of the main reasons that people are using SVG for display of graphics is it's native to HTML5. So you can easily view it in like Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and Safari, or completely cross-platform, and you get a really good quality file. So I mentioned it's XML encoded. We'll have a look at this in a bit more detail as we go along. But there's two kind of specs for SVG, and one is the full version, one is the what they call the tiny version, which is really tiny is a subset of the full version, and was really designed for like phones and tablets. Technical illustrations only really need a small percentage of the attributes within the SVG specification. And version 2 now has come out, and really there was no real impact on our initial kind of investigation into the format. And I'll tell you what we've actually done as we move along to try and standardize on a certain profile for SVG. So I really think this is exciting in some ways that this is based on XML SVG. It's an international open standard, and if somebody comes up with a schema for it for technical illustration, we could easily validate against it as well as done with the text side of the house. As I said, my main caveat is data exchange and interoperability is not one of its strong points. In other words, if you export out as an SVG, bringing it back in can cause issues. And we did some work with Adobe Illustrator, and it can export an SVG, but try bringing it back in, opening it, and you can get a completely different result from what you exported. So that's why we wanted to, certainly within our own software, is come up with a profile for it, which we then could standardize in, so we could round trip SVGs within our own kind of environment. So where is it used? It's definitely now used in aerospace and defense. We have a lot of customers who are using certainly some of our technology to convert CGM to SVG to go into items displaying on the in a web environment. So that's definitely grown within the last couple of years. It's also used in GIS for mapping on the web. So this is where they would use vector graphics as opposed to something like Google that's still using images, really. So raster images. We're seeing a small use of it in the graphics arts world. But I think one of the main things we've seen using it for is kind of dashboards. So data-driven graphics on the web. So I just have a few examples of that, if I can pull them up. So this is an SVG, and it's data-driven from a spreadsheet. So you could link the graphic to a spreadsheet and drive some output from it. So you could see this being used in a dashboard environment. So this is where we have seen SVG begin to be used. And this is quite a useful example because it gives you all the coding that's done as well, so you can see how that was achieved, and the spreadsheet as well. So that's just to give you a glimpse into that. And I think I have another example here, which is a bit kind of more technical illustration based, which is some gear wheels animated. And this is the other thing that SVG is pretty good at, is animation as well. So and again, the code is given with this, so you can see this is achieved. You can see the number of teeth on each wheel, and you can actually change this in the text here, and you can even change the speed of this. So some really nice examples of how you could use SVG to kind of make it more interactive or more explanatory of the information that you're doing. And this is all vectors as well, so which is good, so you can change it very easily. So some really good parts to using SVG if you have obviously the budget and the business case to do that. So from time to time, I say survey, but it's more of a poll, just to give you a chance to make some feedback. So I'm just going to try and launch this poll. And so if you just want to, I'm going to launch it now. So if you just want to kind of provide some feedback, that'd be great. It's always nice to get some feedback from the audience, see what kind of formats that you're using. Hopefully you're still listening to me, and possibly not. So please vote. Hopefully, here we go. Okay, it might be a bit of a lag. Okay, got 60%, 80% of people. Great. I'm going to close it at last chance before we display it. I'm going to close it now. Oh, 100%. Let's go. So I'm going to close and then share that with you. So unfortunately, I can't see it now. So let me see if we can make it a bit bigger. Oh, here we go. So yeah, 80% CGM, so 50-50. That's good. And with TIFF as well. So that kind of makes sense, because all those formats, if you're in the S1000D, are all part of that spec. And PDF has become more and more popular as an interchange format with, say, with Adobe Illustrator. So those numbers kind of make sense. So I'm going to hide that. Thanks for your feedback on that. We don't kind of share these with anybody else, and it doesn't relate back to you as a. So it's all anonymous. So don't be scared about that. Okay. So thanks for your feedback on that. As I said, please. That's the end of the intro. So if you've got any questions, please post them into the chat box, or if you want to raise your hands, do, and then we'll open your mic up. So conversion and display. So this is obviously quite a big topic, because anything to do with data exchange or exporting and we can have so many kind of different parameters that can happen, different pieces of software, different ways of exporting, different settings and attributes. So this is quite a big subject, and we do a lot of our support around updating our software to support people's different environments and what they're trying to achieve. So what we found is the primary conversion scenario is not really SVG to CGM, it's really the other way around, CGM exported to SVG. And the main driver is to display the graphics in a web environment using SVG. So that means you don't really need a plugin. And that's one of the reasons, primary reasons that people have done this, because CGM traditionally needed some kind of plugin technology. But we've also found that people want to import SVG as well. We wouldn't probably recommend that into our software, especially if you're using Adobe Illustrator, because you could use PDF, which would be a much better mechanism. But if that's all you have and other files have, been thrown away, then we've found that SVG is not a bad way to get the file in, and we've done a lot of work to do, certainly with Adobe Illustrator, to make that work. But we really wouldn't recommend you use SVG as your archive format. We more see it as more disposable, that you could use it for display purposes. So what we did is to try and kind of standardize, certainly within our own environment, and probably to socialize to other software vendors, is create a Tech SVG profile, which really standardize on certain elements within the SVG file. And the reason we did that, I'll go into a second, but what we decided to do is not kind of keep that profile proprietary to ourselves, but to socialize it and make it available. So we put it on our website, so it's free for you to look at. If you're a vendor, then you could base your software on it in exporting to these elements, which give us a good kind of way of interchanging information in SVG. So if you go to our website, that link will take you to it there. It's in the support section. You can download the PDF. So just to explain what Tech SVG is, it's a subset of both the specifications, because Tiny really didn't actually satisfy all of them. So you can see there's a small intersection with SVG full. So that's probably a good kind of indicator of how much of the spec that we use of the full spec. So you could probably say it's like probably less than a third of the spec we really need within a technical illustration, which means the file is going to be lighter, it's going to be easier to use, and it's going to be standard. So you'll see in a second that it does need to be standard as well as we go through this. But in the beginning, we have some challenges around file size, but we've really optimized that now. SVG can tend to bloat the file and make it bigger, but we've really done a lot of work around that, making that file size a lot smaller. Raster images works differently between CGM and SVG, so we'll talk about that. Hotspots certainly is different, line styles and fonts. So these are the key things we think for illustration that had to be taken care of in the SVG, so there was a standard way of writing that information out. So Tech SVG is, like I say, it's a subset. It should help interchanging files between different software. And we have tried to socialize that out to the different communities in aerospace and defense. So it's not like we've been kind of keeping it a secret. So as you know, probably a web browser environment is the most common way now to distribute your information with technical manuals, certainly on the web, or PDF for that matter, for traditional kind of print modes. So our kind of strategy is that we wanted to try and make it as easy as possible for our customers to use whatever format they wanted, either CGM or SVG. And as mentioned earlier, SVG doesn't require that plugin. But what we found recently is that Edge, there was a pullback, and Edge now is based on Chromium, and they're actually supporting plugins still. But you have to kind of turn something on within the software to enable that to happen. So in theory, if you've got a legacy, an ActiveX control, you still might be able to use Edge to deliver your information. So it might not be that you have to go to say SVG. You might be able to just base everything on Edge. That's Microsoft Edge. Or you could use VisXView HTML5 to display the CGM. So yeah, SVG is HTML5. So it's native to that. So that's an easy way to go. And we've now actually, within our ActiveX control, because people are still using it, we can support SVG in there as well. So you could have like both formats running within our technology now. So this is why we've been, we're so focused on the two formats, because we want them to work together as opposed to opposing each other. And I think we've achieved that over the last couple of years. So we would now consider ourselves, well, not me personally, but other people, they are developers. Like, we're pretty much expert in both CGM and SVG, whereas at one time we were known as the CGM experts. So if you're interested in how the plugin works in Edge, if you're using that software, there's just you need to kind of turn that function on, and you can do that with something called flags. So that should help you actually turn the actual ability to use an ActiveX within the Edge environment, which is obviously the latest version of Microsoft's kind of Internet Explorer. So there might be a way that you can still carry on using your old technology still if you're using ActiveX. So with CGM, this is kind of an overview of what you could use. So with CGM, you could still use the plugin. You could still probably use it in Edge, although we've no use cases to prove that. If you wanted to use ActiveX for CGM, you'd have to use an old Internet Explorer, or there's something IE tab in Chrome that you could use with the ActiveX control as well. And with CGM and SVG, no plugin in those browsers, then with Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and Edge, you've got SVG, which is native, and then you could use CGM with our technology, VisXView HTML5. So one thing I kind of missed out was that the SVG profile enables you to write out hotspots in a standard way. And that is really key if you're trying to go to a viewer or even to the web to view these hotspots. The SVG, you could write it in a multitude of ways. There's no set way of writing a hotspot. And we've created that. So it's a standard way, so we know it would work in the different browsers. Okay, just a few, not questions, but comments. I've developed an SVG. Yeah, we have heard of another profile that somebody's developed, I think in the NATO area. Well, we have looked at that, but we, not to disrespect what they've done, but we felt it didn't go far enough, and it wasn't as, say, rich is probably a good word, not as rich a profile as we've created. And it doesn't look like it was done. Our background was for the CGM, and Don, who's in the background here, Don was part of the team that wrote the profile for CGM for S1000D. So he has a long experience of knowing what needs to go in to make that effective. So thanks for that comment. Just read another comment. In fact, I'll come back to that one at the end. Let's carry on for now. We've got another survey or poll that I just want to run. So hopefully you'll all take part. Okay. So it's a pretty quick one, I think. I'm going to launch it. now. So it's just kind of a yes, no kind of thing. So please vote, and then I'll get those results back to you. Not sure there's a bit of a lag, so possibly. So I got about 40% voted. 60. Few more seconds I'll give you. If you're not attentive, then there's no problem. I realise we're all busy. Get it to 40 seconds, and then I'm going to close. So I've only really got 2 answers now. I'm going to close that and share it with you. So interesting. So you both, yeah. So we've got kind of the highest percentages actually converting, which is interesting. And then we're still having people who don't convert. And nobody's saying they actually use CGM to display illustrations, which is interesting as well. Okay. So I'm going to hide that. Quite kind of threw me that a bit. Okay. Not a bad thing. So now I come to, so thanks for the comments so far. And again, if you've got any questions, please post them after that particular one. Don't be afraid if you feel that they're stupid questions, and there's no such thing, as we all know. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So please ask it, and we'll try and answer it as best we can. So I think there's some considerations you need to make if you're converting from CGM to SVG. And certainly around Raster there is, because TIFF is not supported within SVG. So if your kind of software is not seeing that as an issue, then you're possibly going to just miss that out. So what we do is we take the TIFF, and then we then the 2 formats image formats that are supported is JPEG and PNG. We will support the conversion of the TIFF to those formats, but you have to kind of then think about what are the limitations of a PNG to a TIFF, and same with JPEG as well. So just to be aware that conversion does take place, and it could also mean that any kind of compression that's been put on the TIFF could be lost, so the file size could go up substantially. So we'd always advise, if you're doing a conversion, to do like a check, just to make sure the files don't balloon out of kind of your viewer world parameters. So just to be something to be thoughtful about. So as I mentioned, it does support, it is a hybrid format, but it doesn't support the TIFF. So yeah, always check your quality. The vector elements are not affected, but that is something to bear in mind if you're converting a large number of files, or even one file from CGM to SVG, is if it's got raster in, make sure that you're getting a good result. Okay, hotspots, as I mentioned this before, is something that we put into the profile because SVG doesn't really give you a standard way of writing a hotspot. It can have interactivity, but no standard way is outlined. And I'm pretty sure, going back to the comment I had, is that I don't think we thought there was anything in that spec that defined how a hotspot should be written in a SVG in a standard way. Plus, the people who wrote that were not software vendors, so they were just writing a spec from kind of an intellectual and academic way. So it's also, the software has got to be capable of writing to a particular standard way of doing the hotspot. So, you know, there's a lot of properties within hotspot that then have to be carried over into the SVG file. So like tooltips and things like that. So they really have to be defined in the conversion, how they're then represented in the SVG. And that over the past 2 to 3 years, that's what we've been doing a lot of work on, because within the CGM world, it's clearly defined how that hotspot is written. So even in the spec of S1000D, how that hotspot is written. So why is it important? Well, it's really important for interoperability, you know, within the viewing environment. And also if you're then linking that to XML data within a data module. So, you know, this is kind of crucial when we have interactivity in the graphic and between the graphic and the text. So this is something we've really taken care of within the Tech SVG profile. So another, sorry, I didn't share that one. Let me just, apologies, I didn't actually share that other result with you. I've just launched. This is another really quick one. So do you create interactive graphics? And this surprises me. We have a lot now. Deliveries is within our ETMs, like manuals, electronic manuals, but with illustrations. That used to be. I used to get the answer that no, we're not creating interactive graphics. We're just kind of putting standard graphics on there. So let's. I think we're virtually there, and this is a good answer. So I'm going to close, and this time I'll share it with you. So apologies, I didn't do that before. So that's really good to hear that people are now using interactive graphics. It does vary by the audience, obviously, but from an illustration point of view, because we're talking technical illustration, you know, as coming from that world, it's always nice to see that people are maximizing the electronic delivery of technical manuals and having interactivity between the graphics and the text, or just within graphics themselves for zooming in, zooming out. That's really encouraging to see. There is an overhead usually in time, but perhaps that's now being eliminated by software tools that are out there. So that's really good news and a good result for that one. So this might not be applicable to everybody on the call today, but we feel it's usually with our audiences, it is very crucial that the software they purchase is compliant with the specification, especially if they have to be validated, the data has to be validated in some way. So CGM is definitely part of the spec. As I mentioned earlier, SVG there's no mention of it apart from one acronym. That's about it. So it's not, if you're delivering, if you're a company that's a supplier or you're a service provider, then if you're delivering to a project, you will still have to deliver CGM files. You might also have to deliver SVG if it's going into a viewing environment, but definitely from an archive point of view, the organization you're delivering it to, be it defense community or a prime supplier, prime OEM, then you would need to deliver CGM files still. So that's still key, really. For
David.
Yeah.
David, excuse me. I was going to tell you your poll's still up there.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's still key. So sorry about that. So you have to really bear this in mind. Like, if you have an interchange, there's interchange formats and the display formats, and how we would still class these is that CGM is really a multi-purpose format, where SVG is very kind of tailored towards that display on the web environment. So, but in our world, we still need to do some work in SVG to make it interoperable. So the defense communities, the S1000D community, really hasn't put that into the specification. I think it would be a good idea if they did, because I think SVG has a lot of things going for it, being XML being one of them. So I would really encourage if they can get the community together and introduce SVG into the spec, because it has a lot of potential and there's a lot of potential validation as well. So it's open, and you could add animation, data-driven. So there's a lot of potential there, as well as use it. We could carry on with CGM for legacy, but if you want to do something a bit more interactive, then SVG is a good solution as well. So let's just move on. Apologies for the, there's quite a lot going on with the polls. Just remember sharing and hiding and so forth. So if you're interested in the spec, you can go to these specific chapters. So there's the interactive guidelines. Obviously, these are based around CGM. And then the CGM 2D graphics file format, the profile, web CGM profile. And then the connection between the graphic and the text as well is all outlined in the specification. So that's my only thing that I'm kind of skeptical about with SVG, because in theory they'd have to kind of do all this work over again, and it's a lot of work. So this is probably the holding back on SVG as a format when there's already one working. So. But perhaps they could do a subset where SVG is really just around interactivity, or I don't know. But it seems to make sense. But it's getting the people to do the work would be the main challenge, I would have thought. So the profile that you would use is the web CGM profile. That is described within the spec, and it's laid on top of the ISO standard for CGM. So you call it really a layered profile. So we've got one on top of the other. So you can see probably from there the amount of work that's gone into actually the profile from an outside community, like volunteer basis. So I think this is the last one. Perhaps I'm sure it is. So just interesting to learn if you're working on S1000D or not. So I'm just going to launch that now. This time I'll definitely remember to hide it afterwards. So I'll give you a few seconds just to respond. Okay. I think they're virtually there. Hopefully everybody's nice to see everybody's still attentive and contributing. Again, if you've got any questions, please post them. We will be giving away a ticket. Post a question, that'd be good. Okay, I'm going to close that off. I'm going to share it. So pretty much 75% of today's audience is working with S1000D. 25% no. So if no, I apologize if we've gone into it too much detail, but hopefully if you do look at it in the future, you understand a bit more about it. I always suggest you go to s1000d.org if you want to learn more about the spec. I'm going to hide that now. So thanks for your input again. And we're nearing the end. So I've kind of interchanged or spoke about some of my or some of Larson's technology during the webinar. So as I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work around CGM and SVG, especially SVG, because it's been kind of more of an upcoming format, more widely used. So we have a software called VisX Edit, and VisX View HTML5 I've mentioned a few times as well. So let's just look at that first very briefly. So this is a CGM file, and there's no plugin. It's in a HTML page. We have no plugin. So we can still zoom in. We can go to the extent. We can pan around. We can see hotspots. And we've actually linked it here to the graphic. So if you notice I go over the graphic, it gives me a tooltip, but it also highlights the kind of very small parts list. So no plugin, VisX View HTML5, and it works the other way as well. So click on bearing and it highlights it over here. So it's a dual link between the text and graphics. So that's using Vizx View HTML5. So again, you could use SVG, but kind of a bit more complex because you would have to not invent, but you'd have to kind of use a bit more development time, because you'd have to develop this kind of toolbox if you wanted to interact with the SVG file. So that would be the downside there. So Vizx Edit, for those of you using S1000D, we created this template which you can download off our website, which gives you some guidance around the guidelines of creating illustrations in S1000D. But if I just go up here and save as, we can see this is a CGM. We could save it as an SVG file. So that would use the Tech SVG profile. It would standardize the way that the hotspots are written, and you could easily view those in your HTML5 environment, and also link them if you needed to within your XML. So that's the SVG. That's within our illustration software. Let's go back to the slides. And we've also got a batch converter, which is really popular, convert CGM to vector, which includes SVG, PDF, and EPS. So you can do batch conversions of files. The only thing, it will not hotspot them automatically. It will preserve the hotspots if they're already in the CGM, but it won't kind of create hotspots within there. We do have another product called Vizx Transform, which will do that. It will auto hotspot files. Say CGMs, it will auto hotspot them and then go into the SVG. So that's Vizx Transform. So these are all kind of production tools. And we also do SDKs of these as well. And we have like quite a few customers who are using our SDK to do CGM to vector or CGM to SVG conversions on the fly within their own software. So as I mentioned, software development kits. So that's really for developers or other vendors who want to integrate our technology. So as I mentioned, we're still open to questions. Obviously, nobody wanted to raise their hand today, but that's okay. But really open to questions about the topics we've been looking at. And we've really kind of learned a lot about the formats, especially SVG, over the past few years. So we've got to do that really in a lessons learned kind of strategy, where we are working with customers who are trying to create these SVGs. They're having issues, and then we're kind of tweaking the software to work with specific file formats. And that really it's a big benefit to our customers, working with both the off-the-shelf software, but also the SDKs as well, where they actually integrate the software into their own environment. So from our experience, the CGM plugins are still being used, but they're being used obviously in legacy systems where it's difficult to move out of that environment. So hopefully that gives some ideas to the kind of the audience today. If you've got a legacy system that uses an ActiveX control, then perhaps you can carry on with that. If you use, say, the Edge browser, perhaps you might want to experiment with that. Or you could go to Vizx View HTML5, or you could use Convert to SVG. So as far as we're concerned, we want you to go in the direction that works best for you, and to draw on our experiences and our expertise around these formats and try and help you if you're having interchange issues, display issues, any kind of things that we have so much experience now, which we can draw on, like to help you out with any issues you might have with the interchange of information. Okay, so let's go. So we dealt with the comments. So let's just look at some of the question. So we had another. I'm not sure if this is a question. CGM is hard to have running within native apps, iOS, which is why many turn to SVG. Will your technical support native apps for seamless CGM viewing within the need for SVG conversion? Without the, I suppose, Don, did you read that? You probably have more chance to read it.
Yes. Yeah, I've been reading that. The question is, will your technology support native apps for seamless CGM viewing without need for SVG conversion? And yes, there is a couple of things we can do there. One is the HTML5 viewer will run in an iOS app because it's platform independent. So that's one thing. But for people that really need to really tightly integrate it, we do have a SDK for iOS 2 that allow developers to write a native, an iPad app, let's say, and insert the CGM viewer directly into an app. We have some MRO vendors, some people that use airline MRO systems that need native CGM viewing. So yes, there is a solution there too.
Yeah, we also have our own application, the iOS app, don't we, Don?
Yeah, there's one on the store. It's called the iVisX, and it's a native CGM viewer. It's an iPad iOS app that you can download for a few bucks and view CGMs directly.
Yeah, that's on the app store. So
yeah,
I think with this is where with VisX View HTML5 we kind of recognized that it was going to be difficult for people with large archives of CGM to carry on using them if there was the plugins were going to go away, or they wanted to go to multi-platform solutions. So that's really why we developed the VisX View HTML5. So that kind of eliminates that kind of, we can go multi-platform with it, and eliminates that kind of concern that you can't keep using these CGM files. But as I said earlier, we're quite happy for people to convert to SVG, and a lot of our customers are doing that using our technology as well. So we're kind of sitting in both camps, which you might think we should only really sit in one, but we think it's important that we offer our expertise to really all parts of the community. Okay. Yeah, it's great to see that Larson's driving SVG message. Yeah, which we are. Adopt a standard to SVG. Are they doing their own thing? With the vendor community, we've posted publicly the SVG profile, and we do have we have vendors who are certainly within CSDBs and so forth who are using our technology to convert CGMs to SVGs. So by default, they're actually using standardized SVG using our profile. So and that's in the vendor community where they're using our technology. Don mentioned some MRO companies, and we've got some companies using CSDB companies that have integrated our technology and using the conversion. So kind of by default, they're standardizing on it. But as I mentioned, there's nobody really there's nobody really using or really going out in the S1000D community itself to kind of change the support of graphics within the specification. And I kind of understand that because of the cost to do that, especially now. But even before, that would be and I think, Don, you would say there's a big expense to do that. It would mainly be volunteer time to write something into the S1000D spec for SVG.
There doesn't seem to be the appetite for developing standards these days, or for putting, the dedicating the technical expertise to the task to develop these standards. The Web CGM, there was a lot of energy and a lot of participation in Web CGM in a multi-vendor and collaborating with S1000D. And but these days it doesn't seem to be the appetite, but there still seems to be the need. So we're doing what we can to promote it, and we're open about it. And like David says, we're socializing it and actively using the technology, deploying it to vendors that want to integrate it into their systems. And so we're doing what we can, but I would like to see more done along those lines.
Okay, thanks, Don. So another question is that keeps arising is like CGM and SVG file sizes. I know I mentioned we've done a lot of optimization around that, but in general, what is the main what can be the main difference in file sizes, Don? Somebody's asking. So if you've got a CGM file and then you export it SVG and it's got raster images in it, what would be kind of the difference in file size?
Well, typically we see about if you just want a general rule of thumb, I see a two to three expansion, going from CGM to SVG, which is not bad considering that SVG is all readable text, readable XML text. So now in some cases I've seen a bigger explosion, especially if it's a raster image, because again, because you have to, if you're going to encode a raster image in XML, you've got to base 64 encode it, which is another form of text encoding of binary information. So you got some extra overhead there, but generally it's pretty good. But like I say, about 2 to 3 times is kind of the general rule.
Okay, and one more. I know we've been probably overshot our time, but so one more about hotspotting, Dan. Is that how does the hotspotting information compare between CGM and what we've done in SVG? Is it the same functionality? Is it the same? Obviously, it writes it in a different way because it's XML, but is it the same? Could it offer the same functions like tooltips and so forth that CGM does?
Yeah, it does. It's all the same functionality. The SVG spec was a general spec, like you said, so it didn't address the specific needs of technical illustrations and interactivity. And although it's generally, you can do all that in SVG. It's because you can put SVG with JavaScript and do all kinds of great things. So functionally, it's what we've done, the way we've defined hotspots is equivalent. And like we said, it's bidirectional. So we can open a tech SVG in an editor, and we can edit the hotspots. Just so it's that's the advantage of having a standard way is you can round trip it. So, but functionally, it achieves exactly the same thing. A hotspot is essentially a region that's a geometric region, a circle or an ellipse or a rectangle or a path that defines a hotspot, and you can mouse over and then get that mouse over an event and then do something with it, like highlight it or link to another part of to another document or something. So yeah, so it's exactly the same functionality. So that's good.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for all the questions and comments, everybody, and for your participation today. It's been really good. We're probably going to do, I think, one more webinar talking in technical illustration this year, and it will be probably early December. Again, we're probably going to talk a bit more about file formats, but this time in the 3D world. And because, again, we've kind of recognized sort of the specification, certainly S1000D specification, it's very open in what it's recommending you use in the 3D world. Like no file format is kind of excluded. which we don't think is a really good direction for the spec, but also for, again, interoperability and data exchange. So we want to really touch on that subject, probably in the final webinar this year. So please keep an eye out for that. Probably, as I said, early December, and that will be the final one of the year. So thanks for your participation today. It's been great, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. And keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page and so forth for the next event. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day. Thank you.